We're diving into one of the most fascinating and underrated cases in international law, the certain Norwegian loans case, brought before the International Court of Justice in the 1950s. This case involved France, Norway, and millions of dollars worth of debt. But more importantly, it shaped global debates about sovereignty, jurisdiction, and how far a nation can go in protecting itself from international lawsuits. Let's explore how a simple dispute over government bonds became a landmark moment in legal history. Our story begins in the early 20th century, when Norway issued government loans, basically government bonds, many of which were purchased by foreign investors, including French nationals. These bonds had a special feature: they were payable in gold. This mattered because, after World War II, global financial systems changed dramatically. Many countries abandoned the gold standard, and obligations tied to gold became financially complicated and expensive. In the 1950s, Norway changed its laws in a way that affected how these loans were repaid, particularly removing or altering the gold clause. French investors believed they were being paid less than what was originally promised. So France took the dispute to the International Court of Justice, launching the case in the mid-1950s. Hence why it's sometimes called the 1955 Norwegian loan case. But legally, the case is known as Certain Norwegian Loans, France versus Norway, ICJ, 1957. The heart of the dispute wasn't actually the money. The real question was this: could France sue Norway in the ICJ without Norway's consent? This brings us to a core principle of international law. A country cannot be taken to the ICJ unless it has agreed to accept the court's jurisdiction. France argued that Norway had given such consent through something called the optional clause, an article in the ICJ statute that lets countries declare they accept the court's compulsory jurisdiction. But Norway's declaration accepting ICJ jurisdiction had a big condition. It said any dispute must fall under the same conditions as Norway's previous declaration to the old Permanent Court of International Justice. And that declaration included a reservation. Norway said it would not accept the court's jurisdiction in disputes involving matters that fell under the country's domestic jurisdiction. France tried to sue anyway, so the ICJ had to decide, does it have jurisdiction? Or is Norway right that this dispute is shielded by its reservation?
France argued that this was not a domestic matter. It was a question of fulfilling international financial obligations.
Norway had accepted ICJ jurisdiction, and the bond repayment terms were a matter of international concern. Reservations made by Norway should not apply, or at least not in this way.
France basically said, when you sell bonds to foreigners, you're entering the international marketplace. So disputes over those bonds are international too.
This is a domestic issue. Norway's bond laws, its currency system, and gold clauses are internal economic matters. Norway's reservation is valid. Under its optional clause declaration, it had the right to exclude cases involving domestic jurisdiction. France itself had a similar reservation in its own ICJ declaration. And under the ICJ's principle of reciprocity, each state can apply its reservations against the other. This was crucial. Norway argued, France has the same kind of reservation, so if France would not allow a similar case against itself, it cannot force us into this one.
In 1957, the International Court of Justice issued its judgment, and the outcome surprised many people. The court ruled it did not have jurisdiction to hear the case, but the way the court explained this is what made the case famous. The ICJ said, under the principle of reciprocity, France cannot demand more from Norway than it offers itself. Since France also had a reservation excluding matters of domestic jurisdiction from the court's compulsory authority, France's own reservation worked against it in this case. Therefore, Norway could rely on France's reservation, meaning the court had no jurisdiction. In essence, France's own rules came back to block its claim. The certain Norwegian loans case didn't just end a financial dispute, it set important precedents in international law. 1. Strengthening the principle of reciprocity. Countries now had a clearer understanding. If you put conditions on accepting ICJ jurisdiction, those conditions can and will be used against you. 2. Clarifying domestic jurisdiction. The case reaffirmed that sovereign states can protect certain internal matters, like currency and financial regulations, from international legal review. 3. Showing the limits of ICJ compulsory jurisdiction. The ICJ cannot force a state into a lawsuit if the state has made legitimate reservations. This ruling shaped how many countries drafted their ICJ optional clause declarations afterward, often adding more specific reservations to protect national interests. 4. Diplomacy over litigation. Because the court declined to take the case, both countries eventually resolved the issue politically rather than judicially, highlighting that international disputes often require diplomacy just as much as law. The certain Norwegian loans case may seem like a technical legal matter, but its impact has echoed through decades of international law. It teaches us about sovereignty, fairness, and the delicate balance between national interests and global governance. If you enjoyed this deep dive into international legal history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what case or topic you'd like us to cover next.